The sky above the colony was calm. Stars shined like silver sparks, and the colony's people moved through their daily lives without fear. They believed danger was far away, hidden among the endless galaxies. Humanity had fought, hard to claim its place among the stars, but peace was fragile, like glass waiting for the smallest crack. That crack came without warning. On a quiet night, deep sensors picked up strange movements beyond the edge of the system. At first, commanders thought it was simple background noise, asteroid clusters shifting, comets passing, or drifting metal from old wars. But soon the signals grew stronger. The readings were sharp, structured, not random at all. Ships were approaching. A fleet. The first explosions came before the alarms even finished. Towers of fire rose into the sky. Ground defenses lit up, cannons, firing bright streams into the darkness, but the attackers were ruthless. They had studied humanity's patterns. They targeted communication hubs first, cutting off signals before a warning could spread across the stars. The colony was thrown into chaos. Families ran into shelters. Pilots scrambled to their fighters, but many were destroyed on the ground before they could take off. The invaders moved with precision, like predators that had hunted humans for years. They did not want resources. They did not want slaves. They wanted to break humanity's will. The defenders fought with everything they had, but the attack was too sudden, too heavy. Fire rained from the skies. Cities turned to ash in hours. 1,000 voices called out into the darkness, but silence followed. The colony was falling, and the enemy celebrated each strike as if victory was already theirs. But humanity had one advantage the invaders did not understand. Pain did not break them. It forged them. High Command received fragments of the attack in scattered messages. Images of burning cities, broken ships, and desperate soldiers reached the War Council. For a moment, there was silence in the great chamber. Not fear, not hesitation. Silence, because anger needed no words. Humanity had seen this before in its history. Great empires trying to crush them, tyrants trying to bend them, wars meant to erase them. And every time, humans answered with fire. The Council did not ask whether to fight. They asked only how fast the fleet could move. In secret shipyards hidden across the void. Humanity's war fleet was already waiting. Battleships larger than cities, cruisers armed with plasma cannons, and carriers filled with wave after wave of fighters, all prepared for the moment they would be needed. That moment had come. Admirals gave no speeches. Soldiers required no promises. The fleet lit its engines, and space itself seemed to burn as thousands of ships roared into the black. Each ship carried not just weapons, but fury. Humanity had been attacked. Their people had been slaughtered. There would be no mercy. As the war fleet gathered, the survivors of the colony sent one final broadcast, weak but defiant. A voice crackled across the stars. They came to destroy us. They thought we would break. They thought wrong. Tell them. Humanity is coming. The signal ended in static, but it reached the war fleet. Pilots and soldiers heard those last words and carried them in their hearts. It was no longer about defense. It was about vengeance. Out in the dark, the invaders believed their mission was complete. They had struck fear into humans, or so they thought. They had no idea what storm they had awakened. The war fleet was already on the move, silent but unstoppable. And when it arrived, the galaxy itself would remember. The gathering storm, the war fleet moved like a living wave across the stars. Engines glowed blue and white, leaving streaks of fire in the void. Thousands of ships followed a single path, bound by anger, duty, and the memory of what had been lost. Each soldier on board remembered the images of the fallen colony. Towers burning, children screaming, defenders cut down before they could even fire. It was not just war anymore. It was personal. Inside the flagship, the command deck glimmered with holograms. The admiral stood in silence, watching the swarm of red markers on the star map. Each one was an enemy ship. They had struck first. They believed humanity was weak, scattered, too young to hold the stars. The admiral's eyes narrowed. They would soon learn how wrong they were. Orders echoed through the fleet. Weapons were charged. Fighters prepared for launch. The ships moved. In perfect formation, silent but deadly. No music, no celebration. Just the steady rhythm of machines and the heavy beating of human hearts. The journey was not short. Space stretched endlessly, but anger filled the silence. Soldiers trained without rest. Pilots simulated dogfights until their bodies ached. Engineers checked every cannon, every torpedo, every shield, as if their own lives depended on it, because they did. Among the crew, stories of the fallen colonies spread like fire. Some whispered of families lost. Others spoke of children who never had a chance to escape. None of these stories weakened them. They sharpened them, like blades against stone. Humanity had always survived by carrying scars, and now the scars burned bright in every soldier's soul. Then came the first contact. Scouts reported enemy patrols near the outer edges of the system. A small squad of alien cruisers moved lazily across the dark, unaware of the storm approaching. They were hunters, relaxed and arrogant, their weapons idle, as if no one dared to challenge them. The war fleet did not wait. The order came down in a single word: engage. From the blackness, human fighters burst forward, wings glowing, engines screaming. They struck like arrows of fire, tearing into the patrol before the enemy could even raise shields. Explosions tore open the void. The first cruiser split apart, flames spilling into space. Another tried to turn, but torpedoes locked on and shattered it into fragments. The enemy fleet panicked. They had expected silence after their attack, not vengeance. Messages crackled among their ships, confusion and fear spreading faster than fire. For the first time, the invaders realized humanity was not broken. Humanity was coming for them. Within minutes, the patrol was gone. Only wreckage remained, drifting lifeless in the black. But the message had already been sent. Survivors had screamed warnings into the coms before their destruction. The enemy command would now know that the humans were on the move. And that was exactly what humanity wanted. The admiral ordered the fleet forward without pause. There would be no hiding, no delay. The enemy had declared war by slaughtering innocents. Humanity would answer with fire so great it would be written into the stars themselves. As the war fleet advanced, survivors from scattered colonies began to send messages. Some were weak signals, broken by static, but their meaning was clear. They begged for revenge. They begged for justice. And the fleet carried those cries like banners of war. The enemy, however, was not idle. They gathered reinforcements, pulling ships from across their empire. They had underestimated humans once, but now they prepared for full battle. They believed numbers would win. They believed their massive fleet could crush the humans before the war truly began. But they did not understand what burned inside the human heart. Humanity did not fight only with numbers. They fought with memory, with rage, with the unbreakable will of a species that had risen from caves, crossed oceans, and conquered worlds. To fight humanity was to fight every story of survival carved into their history. Asterisked as the two fleets moved. Closer, the void between them felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Soldiers tightened their grips on weapons. Pilots stared at their screens with unblinking eyes. The moment was near. The war fleet was not afraid. They had already lost too much. Fear was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Determination. In the command deck, the admiral gave one final order. His voice was calm, but his words carried the weight of humanity's fury. Ready all ships. We do not stop until they fall. The storm had begun, and soon the galaxy would feel its full power. Asterisk fire across the stars. The two fleets finally faced each other across the endless dark. On one side, humanity's war fleet stretched like a wall of steel, thousands of ships standing in unbroken formation. On the other side, the enemy empire's armada spread wide, confident in their numbers, confident that they could drown humanity in fire. The void between them was silent, but heavy with tension. It was the silence before. Thunder-dot sensors lit up across both fleets. Targeting systems locked. Weapons glowed with energy, waiting for the first strike. In command decks across the human fleet, officers stood tall, waiting for a single word. Soldiers tightened straps. Pilots whispered final words to themselves. Engineers held their breath. Everyone knew the storm was seconds away. The admiral raised his hand. The command deck was silent. Then, with a single motion, he gave the order. Fire. The void exploded. Asterisk from human ships came a flood of plasma bolts, rail slugs, and missile swarms. The blackness of space lit up like a burning sky. The first line of enemy ships was torn apart before they could even react. One cruiser burst open. Like a shattered egg, its glowing core spilling fire into the darkness. Another was ripped in half by a rail slug the size of a train, its pieces tumbling into the abyss. But the enemy was not weak. They had prepared for this. Their return fire came like a storm of their own lasers bright as suns, torpedoes glowing red, shockwaves that rattled human shields. Smaller human frigates were caught in the first wave. One ship was sliced clean through, spinning helplessly before breaking apart. Another was hit by a cluster of torpedoes, vanishing in a silent bloom of fire. Yet the human fleet did not falter. Losses only made them fight harder. Fighters launched in swarms, hundreds at a time, darting between massive battleships like angry hornets. They weaved through enemy fire, striking at weak points, cutting down enemy bombers before they could reach the larger human ships. The battle was chaos and fury. Explosions painted the void. Ships turned to debris in seconds. Both sides bled fire into the darkness, but something inside the human fleet burned brighter. A destroyer named Iron Flame was struck by heavy fire, its shields collapsing, its hull cracked and breaking. But instead of retreating, the captain ordered one final charge. With engines screaming, the ship hurled itself straight into the enemy line, firing every weapon at once. The Iron Flame tore through two enemy cruisers before exploding, leaving a hole in the enemy formation. Human pilots cheered, their anger burning hotter. The admiral watched the star map as red markers flickered and vanished. Slowly, carefully, the tide was turning. The enemy had numbers, but humanity had something they could not calculate: willpower. Humans fought as if each ship carried the memory of every fallen colony, every broken city, every lost family. They refused to yield. Enemy commanders shouted across their channels, confusion spreading. They had believed humanity would break under pressure, that grief would crush them. Instead, grief had turned to fire. For every human ship lost, 10 more pushed forward with fury. Then came the turning point. A squadron of human bombers slipped behind the enemy's front lines. Flying low and silent, they evaded detection until it was too late. With perfect timing, they unleashed their payload, a storm of heavy torpedoes that slammed into the enemy flagship. The explosion lit the void like a new star. The flagship shuddered, shields collapsing, flames bursting from its core. For the first time, the enemy armada hesitated. Their command was crippled. Their formation wavered. The admiral's voice rang across the fleet. Press the attack. Do not stop. Break them here. Human ships surged forward, closing the gap, hammering the enemy with relentless fire. Fighters dove into the chaos, striking. Engines, cutting down gun batteries, clearing paths for the larger warships. The void itself shook with fury as the battle raged. The enemy fought back desperately, but the cracks grew wider. Their lines broke apart. Their ships began to scatter. What had begun as an overwhelming force now looked like prey, caught in the jaws of something far more dangerous. And through it all, one truth became clear. The invaders had made their greatest mistake. They had thought humanity was weak. But in this storm of fire, they learned the truth: humanity was unbreakable. The first great battle was not the end. It was only the beginning. The cost of fire. When the guns fell silent, space was filled with wreckage. Broken ships drifted like tombstones, their twisted hulls glowing faintly as fires slowly died in the vacuum. The battle was over, but the silence that followed was not peace. It was heavy, suffocating, filled with the weight of what had been lost. Humanity had won the first clash. The enemy had been pushed back, their flagship shattered, their fleet scattered. But victory came with a price. Across the war fleet, damage reports flooded in. Dozens of human ships were gone. Thousands of lives extinguished in minutes of fire. Inside the flagship, the admiral stood before the star map, watching as green markers slowly dimmed to gray. Each gray light was a ship that would never return. Officers around him spoke in hushed tones, voices filled with both pride and sorrow. They had won, yes, but they all knew this was only the beginning. In the hangars, pilots climbed from their fighters, some cheering, others too exhausted to even speak. Mechanics ran to damaged ships, patching holes, pulling injured pilots from cracked cockpits. The smell of burnt metal clung to the air. For every pilot that returned, another did not. Empty places in the hangar told their own silent story. On one carrier, survivors gathered in the mess hall. They sat together, not speaking, just listening to the silence. Some clutched pictures of families back home. Others stared at the floor, lost in memory. Yet, despite the grief, something stronger pulsed in their hearts. They had seen victory. They had seen the enemy bleed. And they would not stop now. Messages from scattered colonies began to reach the fleet. Civilians who had seen the battle from afar sent broken transmissions of hope. One voice, shaky but firm, said, "You fought for us. You showed them we are not afraid. Do not stop. Strike them for every life they took." The admiral replayed that message across the entire fleet. Soldiers listened in silence. Some clenched their fists. Others wiped their eyes. But all of them felt the same thing. They were no longer fighting only for revenge. They were fighting to protect every voice that still believed humanity could rise from the ashes. The War Council met in secret aboard the flagship. Holograms flickered around the table, showing enemy territories, supply routes, and strongholds. Some officers argued for defense protecting what remained of human space. Others demanded immediate retaliation, a strike deep into enemy heartland. The admiral listened to every voice. Ben spoke with calm authority. They thought we would break. We did not. They thought they could strike and vanish. They cannot. We will carry this war to their homes, to their strongholds. We will make them fear the skies they once claimed as their own. The council agreed. The fleet would not return to safety. It would push forward, deeper into enemy space. Humanity would not wait for the next attack. Humanity would bring the fire. Repairs began at once. Engineers worked without rest, patching holes with salvaged metal, rewiring broken systems, rearming cannons with what little they had. Supply ships moved between fleets, carrying fuel, weapons, and rations. Every human hand had a task. No one stopped. No one complained. They all understood what was at stake. At the same time, scouts returned with grim news. The enemy was gathering. The first battle had wounded them, but not destroyed them. Entire fleets were converging, called from across their empire. Humanity's enemies were vast, their resources deep. They would not surrender easily, but that did not weaken the human spirit. It sharpened it. Soldiers whispered to one another in the corridors. If they come with 10 fleets, we'll destroy 10. If they come with 100, we'll burn 100. The enemy had made a mistake, yes, but not just in attacking a colony. Their greatest mistake was showing humanity what they were capable of. They had given humans something to fight for, something greater than survival. They had given them unity. As the fleet prepared to move, the admiral stood on the command deck once more, looking out into the black void. He knew the path ahead would be bloody. He knew not everyone would return. But he also knew that history would remember this moment, not as the time humanity fell, but as the time humanity rose. The engines roared to life. The war fleet turned toward enemy space, its formation sharp, its weapons armed. Humanity had buried its dead, honored its fallen, and hardened its heart. Now came the part the enemy feared most. Now came humanity's revenge. Into the lion's den, the war fleet entered enemy space like a shadow crossing fire. The stars here burned red, their light dim and cold, as if even the heavens knew this was hostile ground. Enemy patrols moved along the borders, confident that no human ships would dare come this far. They were wrong. Scouts returned with maps of fuel depots, shipyards, and command stations. The enemy's empire was vast, but like all giants, it had weak points. And humanity had come to strike where it hurt the most. The admiral gave the order. We strike the heart of their supply lines. Without fuel, without weapons, their fleets will starve in the void. The fleet split into wings. Carriers launched squadrons of bombers. Destroyers moved in low, using the shadows of asteroids. Battleships held back, ready to rain fire once the enemy's defenses broke. The first target was a massive shipyard orbiting a gas giant. Hundreds of enemy workers moved across scaffolds, repairing cruisers, rearming destroyers, building the destroyers, building the Ostroyak. Next wave of war. They had no idea humanity was already there. Then the sky lit up. Bombers screened down from orbit, releasing payloads of torpedoes and plasma charges. Explosions ripped through scaffolds, tearing half-finished ships apart before they could launch. One battleship under construction cracked in half, its glowing core spilling into the gas giant's atmosphere. Enemy alarms howled, but it was too late. Human fighters were everywhere, darting between towers, blasting fuel lines, destroying weapons bays. The defenders scrambled, but chaos consumed them. Their stations had been built for work, not for war. Human warships closed in, their cannons thundering, reducing shipyards to fire and wreckage. The enemy empire felt the first real wound of the war, but humanity did not stop there. Another wing of the fleet struck a fuel depot hidden near a dead star. The depot was ringed with defenses, turrets and mines, ready to repel any assault. But humans had studied every pattern, every weakness. Fighters darted in first, weaving through the mines, blasting the turrets before they could turn. Then cruisers moved forward, unleashing volleys that cracked the depot's armor. When the final torpedo hit, the entire depot erupted in a fireball. That lit the void for 1,000,000 kilometers. Fuel reserves burned like a second sun, and the shockwave tore enemy defenses apart. The war fleet moved system by system, burning everything the enemy relied upon. Messages of panic spread across the empire. The humans are here. The shipyards are gone. Our depots are destroyed. The invaders had believed they were the hunters. Now they felt what it was to be hunted. Still, humanity paid in blood. A destroyer named Resolute Dawn was surrounded during the assault on the depot. Enemy corvettes swarmed it, hammering its shields until the hull broke apart. The crew fought to the last second, sending a final transmission. "Tell them we did not fall in vain." That message spread across the fleet. Every soldier heard it. Every pilot carried it like a blade in their chest. They would not stop. The admiral knew these strikes were more than battles. They were messages written in fire. Every station burned was a reminder to the enemy. Humanity could reach them anywhere. No system was safe. No stronghold untouchable. But with every strike, the enemy's fury grew. Intelligence reported that the Empire was gathering its greatest armada. Fleets from across dozens of systems were converging, ready to crush humanity once and for all. They believed sheer force would finally break the humans. The Admiral welcomed it. On the flagship, he stood before his crew and said, "They think this is their empire. They think we are the intruders. But this void belongs to none of them. We will show them that the stars themselves will turn against any who try to erase humanity." The fleet roared forward again, leaving behind burning wreckage, shattered stations, and broken enemies. Humanity was not just avenging the fallen colony anymore. They were rewriting the war. The invaders had made their greatest mistake, and they were only beginning to understand what that meant. Asterisk the Grand Armada the enemy empire gathered everything it had. From across dozens of systems, warships converged into one colossal force. Battleships darkened the stars, carriers filled with endless waves of fighters, cruisers lined in perfect ranks like steel walls. It was the largest armada they had ever assembled, a storm built to end humanity in one strike. Their leaders believed this would be enough. They told their soldiers the humans were cornered, reckless, a young race fighting beyond its limits. They promised the armada would crush humanity's war fleet and erase their name from history. But deep inside their command halls, fear lingered. Every report from the front carried the same truth. The humans fought like no enemy they had ever faced. The Empire had the numbers, but humanity had something far more dangerous: rage, sharpened by loss. The Grand Armada advanced, its path cutting straight toward the human fleet. On the flagship, the Admiral studied the incoming storm. His officers reported the numbers with grim voices. The enemy outnumbered them 3-1. In any ordinary war, those odds would mean certain defeat. But this was no ordinary war. The Admiral's voice cut through the silence. "They came to erase us. They brought their empire against our homes. Now they bring their armada against our fleet. But they have already made their mistake. They will learn that humanity does not bow, even before giants." Across the fleet, soldiers listened. Pilots strapped into their fighters. Engineers armed the last of the heavy torpedoes. Medics prepared their stations, knowing many would soon be filled. Everyone understood this would not just be another battle. This would be the test of humanity's very survival. Then the two forces met. The void lit up with fire as the first volleys crossed the dark. Rail slugs screamed across the stars, smashing into enemy shields. Lasers cut through human cruisers, tearing holes into their armor. The fleets closed in until the blackness between them became a storm of fire. Enemy fighters swarmed like insects, hundreds upon hundreds pouring from carriers. But humanity's pilots did not flinch. They rose to meet the swarm, darting and weaving, turning the skies into a deadly dance. Explosions bloomed like flowers of light as ships fell on both sides. The human fleet held its formation, its wall of steel unbroken. Battleships fired in steady rhythm, each shot pounding into enemy lines. Carriers launched wave after wave, filling the void with relentless fury. Destroyers slipped into gaps, striking weak points, tearing apart ships far larger than themselves. But the enemy pressed harder. Their sheer weight began to push the humans back. Entire wings of human frigates were swallowed by the storm, shields collapsing, hulls breaking apart. The admiral watched as green markers vanished from the star map. His heart tightened, but his voice remained steady. Hold the line. Every second we stand is another second they learn who we are. The enemy believed numbers would decide the battle, but then humanity revealed its secret. From behind an asteroid field, a hidden wing of human warships burst forward. They had waited in silence, cloaked by the rocks, engines cold. Now they ignited in fury, striking at the enemy's flank. Torpedoes screamed into their carriers, ripping them apart in waves of fire. Fighters inside never even had the chance to launch. Enemy armada staggered. For the first time, their formation broke. Their commanders shouted orders, but chaos spread through their ranks. The humans pressed the advantage, surging forward, driving wedges into the cracks. One human battleship, Eternal Resolve, pushed into the very center of the enemy line. It fired until its guns ran hot, shields burning, armor cracking. Enemy ships surrounded it, pounding it with fire. Still it fought, tearing apart cruisers and corvettes before finally collapsing in a burst of light. The sacrifice carved open the path the fleet needed. Pilots screamed through their coms, for the fallen, for the colony, for humanity. Their voices carried across the void, filling the fleet with fire. The battle raged for hours, neither side willing to break. The void itself seemed to shatter under the weight of so much destruction. Stars burned red with reflected fire. Wreckage drifted like broken bones. And still the fleets clashed not, but slowly, inch by inch, the tide turned. The enemy had numbers, yes, but humanity had something numbers could not crush unrelenting will. Each loss only hardened them. Each death only fueled their fury. When the admiral saw the enemy lines faltering, he gave the order all had been waiting for: break them. The fleet surged. Battleships hammered through the gaps. Fighters tore apart what remained of the enemy wings. Carriers unleashed their final payloads. The Grand Armada, once so mighty, began to crumble. The last flame. The Grand Armada began to collapse. What had once been a wall of steel now looked like scattered bones across the stars. Carriers burned, their fighter bays torn apart. Cruisers drifted without power, shields broken, hulls cracking. Battleships tried to hold formation, but their lines were shattered, their discipline broken. The storm they had brought against humanity was turning back upon them. On the flagship's command deck, the admiral watched with steady eyes. He saw enemy ships flicker red on the star map, one after another vanishing as human fire consumed them. But he gave no smile, no sign of triumph. This was not victory for pride. This was vengeance for every life stolen. Still, the enemy refused to surrender. They fought with desperation, as if their empire itself would fall should this battle be lost. Perhaps they were right. An enemy dreadnought pushed forward, its cannons tearing through 3 human destroyers in a single volley. It roared across the void, massive as a city, its core glowing bright. But humanity met its charge. The warship Iron Vow and 2 frigates cut across its path, unleashing every weapon they had. The dreadnought shuddered, its shields burning, but still it pressed on. Then the Iron Vow, crippled and burning, made the final choice. It rammed straight into the dreadnought's heart. The explosion was so bright, it turned the void white. When the light faded, both ships were torn apart in one final act of defiance. Human voices filled the coms. The Iron Vow held true, and their fury burned hotter. The enemy cracked further. Fleets that once advanced now scattered. In panic, commanders screamed for order, but their voices were drowned by fire and static. Their soldiers had believed humanity weak, but now they looked into the void and saw the truth. Humanity was a storm they could not stop. The admiral gave his final command. His voice was calm, but every soldier felt its weight. End it. Human fleet surged forward in unison. Battleships fired their heaviest volleys, each shot tearing open what remained of the enemy line. Cruisers flanked, hammering at crippled ships. Fighters swarmed like furious hornets, hunting every last bomber, striking engines, piercing hulls. The void was fire. Explosions bloomed like dying stars. Enemy ships twisted and broke, their fragments spinning into the abyss. The Grand Armada that had once been the pride of the Empire was no more. In the silence that followed, wreckage drifted in every direction. Fires flickered out one by one, leaving only broken steel and the cold stars. Humanity had stood against an empire's greatest force and shattered it. Across the fleet, soldiers cheered, but their voices carried more than victory. They carried defiance, pride, and the unshakable truth that humanity could not be broken. The admiral stood tall, watching the last enemy marker vanish from the star map. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice low but strong, he spoke to the fleet. They thought attacking us would break us. They thought wrong. Let this wreckage remind the galaxy. Humanity does not fall. Humanity rises. Messages from scattered human colonies poured in. Survivors of the first attack wept as they heard the news. Across the stars, voices rose in hope. Humanity had not only defended itself, it had shown the galaxy a strength none could deny. But in the enemy's empire, the news spread like poison. Their leaders trembled, their citizens whispered in fear. They had seen what the humans could do when angered. They had seen what it meant to awaken a species that refused to die. Their empire would never again look upon humanity with the same arrogance. The war was not over. Humanity knew the enemy still had ships, still had soldiers, still had fury of their own. But after the Grand Armada's fall, one truth was carved into the heart of the galaxy. Attacking humanity was their greatest mistake, and humanity's revenge had only just begun. Asterisk.